These words were written by Rumi in Story Water. I think they fit any storytelling, but especially this one. A story is like the water you heat for your bath. It takes messages between the fire and your skin. It lets them meet, and it cleans you. I'll just get the question right out there, looking at the sermon title. What if Jesus was and is the life of the party? What if he is? I'm not talking about Animal House or a frat party of any kind. I'm talking about the word life. Life of the party. The opposite of life is death, despair, hopelessness, darkness, sin. The opposite is life. The life of the party, the one who comes into any situation in life. The one who's not afraid to not just show up, but do beyond what is needed or expected. This is not about survival. This is about wholeness. This is about taking care. This is about making us people who not only get through the day, but find a way to thrive, to live fully. Now, I am not by any means saying we shouldn't do anything about saving or planning, that there's no sense of security, that this isn't just running around with a basket full of coins or flower petals, giving to one and all. If that works for you, I encourage you to keep doing that. There are places and times that we save. We know this from our evolution, that fear and scarcity are things that we have to watch out for. We are fully aware of this. That has saved us as people, and creatures know this. That if there's going to be scarcity, you got to save up, you got to take care. And if the hair on my arm is standing up, I should probably run away from whatever is making me afraid. But these are survival times. This is not how we live every day of our life. So it's okay to save for a rainy day. It's good to set goals. It's a good practice to lock our doors. It's really good to try to stay away from rattlesnakes. It could save your life. These are the extremes. And then we live every other minute as people who understand the fullness of God. As people who honestly believe there's enough. There's enough grace. There's enough strength. There's enough to go around, not just to get by, but in abundance. Jesus shows up at this wedding at Cana. He shows up at a wedding. So far, all we know about Jesus in Luke is he's been born. He's grown up a little bit. We don't know much about that. He goes to the temple when he's 12. And now, as an adult who's not performed one miracle, he shows up at this wedding at Cana. This is how David Lose describes it. Running out of wine isn't just a social faux pas. It's disaster. Wine isn't merely a social lubricant, you see. It's a sign of the harvest of God's abundance, of joy and gladness and hospitality. And so when they run short on wine, they run short on blessing, and that's a tragedy. Lose goes on to point out that in the Gospel of John, this is the only place this story shows up, is in the Gospel of John. So he writes this, which is why I'm grateful for John to remind us that grace isn't only making up for something we lack, but also providing more than we ever imagined or deserve. I mean, Jesus could have provided just enough wine for the party to go on, and given that people had already been drinking a few days, even a pedestrian bottle would have been gratefully received. But he went way, way beyond expectations to provide more and better wine than they ever had expected. Jesus opens his hand fully. We estimate that there was 120 to 200 gallons of wine that day. That's a lot of wine. That's a lot of wine for a crowd of people who've already been celebrating this marriage for 3 days. There's this sense that in God's kingdom, we don't set limits of how much is too much, but instead we say there's always enough grace and mercy. So Jesus fully extends his hand. What are we so afraid of? Are we afraid there's really a score sheet? Are we afraid that there's going to be a place where the grace actually runs out? So if I extend grace to one more person, the bottle will be empty. Are we afraid that the interest rate on love is going to tank, and then where will we be?
Jesus says there is enough. And he shows it by saying, guess what? There's not just enough. In the God's kingdom, there's more than enough. And you see event after event in his life where he extends so much mercy and grace. He doesn't just say to someone, well, go ahead, I'll give you this balm for your disease. He heals them. He restores them to fullness in community, in employment, in being able to worship in the temple. It's not just getting by, it's abundance. David Lose's words again, grace isn't only about making up for something we lack, but also providing more than we'd ever imagined or deserve. How would your life change if you actually lived this way? If you believe that there is an abundance of grace and mercy and hope and joy, that we actually lived into this, not as people who live with fear and scarcity mentality in all areas of our life, but opened up our hand and said, there's enough. Now this is not going to be easy. We all know this. This doesn't mean we all live happily ever after. This is hard work. There are times that our souls get crushed. There are times that our hearts get broken. There are times we even lose. I'd like to invite you into a story. It's from Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. He said, we're mostly made up of people who give and take. There's givers and takers. That's how we function at work. That's how we function in our relationships. That's how we live. In both cases, people benefit. So if I'm a taker, I will help people, but there's something always in it for me, and that's the only reason I function. Same thing with givers. And as you might guess, givers finish bottom. If you look at students, doctors, lawyers, nurses, teachers, they finish in the bottom. But they also finish at the very top as well. So what we may at first say, the good guy always finishes last. That's true, but they also are at the top of their class. They're at the top of their profession. So I invite you into this story. I apologize for the length of it, but I couldn't tell it on my own without missing details. Consider the political struggles of a hick who went by the name of Samson. He said his goal was to be the Clinton of Illinois, and he set his sights on winning a seat in the Senate. Samson was an unlikely candidate for political office, having spent his early years working on a farm. But Samson had great ambition. He made his first run for the seat at the state legislature when he was just 23 years old. There were 13 candidates, and only the top 4 won seats. Samson made a lackluster showing, finishing 8th. After losing that race, Samson turned his eye to business, taking out a loan to start a small shop with a friend. The business failed, and Samson was unable to repay the loan, so his possessions were seized by local authorities. Shortly thereafter, his business partner died without assets, and Samson took on the debt. Samson jokingly called his liability the national debt. He owed 15 times his annual income. It would take him years, but he eventually paid back every cent. After his business failed, Samson made a second run for the state legislature. Although he was only 25 years old, he finished second, landing a seat. For his first legislative session, he had to borrow the money to buy his first suit. For the next 8 years, Samson served in the state legislature, earning a law degree along the way. Eventually, at age 45, he was ready to pursue influence at the national stage. He made a bid for the Senate. Samson knew he was fighting an uphill battle. He had 2 primary opponents, James Shields and Lyman Trumbull. Both had been state Supreme Court justices, coming from backgrounds far more privileged than Samson's. Shields, the incumbent running for re-election, was the nephew of a congressman. Trumbull was the grandson of an eminent Yale-educated historian. By comparison, Samson had no experience or political clout. In the first poll, Samson was a surprise frontrunner with 44% support. Shields was close behind at 41%, Trumbull a distant third at 5%. But the tide began to turn when a new candidate entered the race, the state's current governor, Joel Madison. Madison was popular, and he had the potential to draw votes from both Samson and Trumbull. When Shields withdrew from the race, Madison quickly took the lead. Madison had 44%, Samson was down to 38%, and Trumbull was just at 9%. But hours later,
Trumbull won the election with 51%, narrowly edging out Madison's 47%. Why did Sampson plummet, and how did Trumbull rise so quickly? The sudden reversal of the positions was due to a choice made by Sampson, who seemed plagued by pathological giving. When Madison entered the race, Sampson began to doubt his own ability to garner enough support to win. He knew that Trumbull had a small but loyal following that would not give up on him. Most people in Sampson's shoes would have lobbied Trumbull's followers to jump ship. After all, with just 9% support, Trumbull was a long shot. But Sampson's primary concern wasn't getting elected. It was to prevent Madison from winning. Sampson believed that Madison was engaging in questionable practices. A year later, he was proven right when Madison was indicted for fraud. In addition to harboring suspicions about Madison, Sampson believed in Trumbull, as they had something in common when it came to issues. For several years, Sampson had campaigned passionately for a major shift in social and economic policy. He believed it was vital to the future of his state, and in this, he and Trumbull were united. So instead of trying to convert Trumbull's loyal supporters, Sampson decided to fall on his own sword. He withdrew and asked his supporters to vote for Trumbull. It was enough to propel Trumbull to victory at Sampson's expense. This was not the first time Sampson put the interest of others ahead of his own. Before, he helped Trumbull win the Senate's race. Despite earning acclaim for his work as a lawyer, Sampson's success was stifled by a crushing liability. He could not bring himself to defend clients if he felt they were guilty. In one case, during a criminal trial, Sampson leaned over and said to an associate, "This man is guilty. You defend him. I can't." Sampson handed the case over to the associate, walking away from sizable fee. These decisions earned him respect, but they raised questions about whether he was tenacious enough to make tough political decisions. Sampson comes very near to being a perfect man, said one of his political rivals. He lacks one thing. The rival explained that Sampson was unfit to be trusted with power because his judgment was too easily clouded by concern for others. In politics, operating like a giver put Sampson at a disadvantage. His reluctance to put himself first cost him the Senate election and left onlookers wondering if he was strong enough for the unforgiving world of politics. Trumbull was a fierce debater. Sampson was a pushover. After the election, a local reporter wrote that in comparison with Sampson, Trumbull was a man of more real talent and power. But Sampson wasn't ready to step aside forever. 4 years after helping Lyman Trumbull win the seat, Sampson ran for Senate again. He lost again. When the weeks leading up to the vote, one of the most outspoken supporters of Sampson's was none other than Lyman Trumbull. Sampson's sacrifice had earned goodwill, and Trumbull was not the only adversary who had become an advocate in response to Sampson's giving. In the first Senate race, when Sampson had 47% of the vote and seemed to be on the brink of victory, a Chicago lawyer and politician named Norman Judd led a strong 5% who would not waver on their loyalty to Trumbull. During Sampson's second Senate bid, Judd became a strong supporter. 2 years later, after 2 failed Senate races, Sampson finally won his first election at the national level. According to one commentator, Judd never forgot Sampson's generous behavior and did more than anyone else to secure Sampson's nomination. In 1999, C-SPAN asked 1,000 knowledgeable viewers to rate the effectiveness of Sampson and 36 other politicians who vied for similar offices. Sampson came out at the very top of the poll, receiving the highest evaluations. Despite his losses, he was more popular than any other politician on the list. You see, Sampson's ghost was a pen name that the Hick used in letters. His real name was Abraham Lincoln. In the 1930s, Lincoln was striving to be the DeWitt Clinton of Illinois, referencing a U.S. senator and New York governor who spearheaded the construction of the Erie Canal. When Lincoln withdrew from his first Senate race to help Lyman Trumbull win the seat, they shared a commitment to abolishing slavery. From emancipating slaves to sacrificing his own political opportunities for a cause, to refusing to defend clients who appeared to be guilty, Lincoln consistently acted for the greater good. Jan Richardson calls Jesus turning water into wine, and situations like Abraham Lincoln's relational miracles. We're a part of it every single day. We're a part of relational miracles. When we
open up our hand, when we turn the other cheek, when we lose the fight, when we don't always have to be right, when we find a way to bring peace into troubled relationships. These are relational miracles. And it's not about just getting by. It's about thriving and being whole and showing the kingdom of God for all of its glory, for all of its fullness. That life is stronger than death. That life is greater than sin. That there is enough forgiveness, love, hope, and joy for everyone. I'd like to close with words by Jan Richardson called Blessing the Water, the Wine. You thought you had learned to live with the empty, the hollow. You could place your ear against the rim of the vessel of your life and hear its ringing echo, not expecting any more, not even bothered, almost to be a bystander at the feast. If not delighting in the celebration, at least not despairing in it. When the water rushed into the emptiness, you were surprised that you were surprised. That you could even feel the sudden wellspring when you thought all had been poured out. And then suddenly, the sweetness that stuns you, that tells you this was not all. This was not the end. This blessing was saving the best for last. Amen.